Today we're talking about mastering, and if you want your song sound professional, polished and ready for release, you have to improve your mastering process. This is the final stage of music production. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through my process of mastering any song, regardless of your skill level. And if you follow these steps, I guarantee your tracks will sound louder, more balanced and ready for release. Let's jump right in. So the first step in mastering any song starts inside the mix. The major reason why we're actually in the mix before the mastering is to create headroom. So headroom is basically just, ducking down the volume of the mix, a bit, so that when it goes to the master, it doesn't clip, or you have space to, increase the volume in the mastering process.
I've come to be right where you are. Every second, every minute, every hour.
All right, so once you find that sweet spot, you can now go ahead and export it as a WAV file. And then I usually just set it to the highest. Just 32-bit stereo. Resampling, you can set it to any one between these four. I usually just leave it at 128. And then you are good to go. So you click start and you export it. And once you're done with that, you can now go ahead and import it into a new FL Studio file right here. All right, so this is exactly where we now go over the step-by-step process of how to actually master our songs. And as you can see over here at the mastering track, I've already gone ahead to, master this strong. And we're going to go in over step-by-step each of what this plugin does and, how they impact the master. So the first step, of mastering, after the the whole preparation, is EQ. As you can see, the first four plugins right here are actually EQs. Even this patcher, if I open it up, you will notice that it's just two EQs that are actually working right here. I'm going to go ahead and explain what exactly those ones are doing right here. So first of all, we have an EQ. And what this does, this first EQ does, is to actually just trim out the extreme lows and extreme highs of our songs. So what I did right here is I went ahead to the presets, go over to, you can pick any of these three right here. You can either pick the 20 to 18, just select the first one, and then you can now gradually move this right here to adjust it. And I usually set this to be around between 25 to 30 hertz if you look over right here. And then I usually set the highs to around between 16.5 to around 7 kilohertz. All right, so once you do that, you take out the extreme lows and the extreme highs, which are technically not that important when it actually comes to our songs, because we technically do not hear those parts of the music. So after you've taken out the extreme lows and extreme highs, what next is mid-side EQ. You want to take out a whole lot of the lows from the sides, so as you can see, we opened patcher here. All right, and then I went over to the presets and I went over to filter. As you can see, we have mid-side EQ right here. Now once you do this, you have this side and you can double click on it, and as you can see, I took out a bit of the low end right here. Let's turn that on. With it off. With it on. Now you notice that these are very, very minor and very, very subtle changes. And that is the thing about mastering. It's not something that is going to be a very, very obvious difference. It's just about making those little subtle differences to, give it that extra boost to be as good as possible. So on the sides, he just took out a bit of the low end frequencies, and in the mids still remain as they are. Nothing is changed. As you can see, this is just exactly how it was. So next up, we have this Pro Q4. And I use this to remove some of those frequencies that I felt were causing a bit of imbalance in the sound. So the way we walk around this is we just pick notes, make the Q the highest, and then we swipe through and find a point where the frequencies are a bit clashing. And when you do that, when you find that point, you just go ahead and duck it down a bit. So let's just go over this while we listen to the track, and let me just add a new one right here.
Yeah, in the ocean of your presence, Lord, you are all that I love. To the rhythm of your beating heart, I'll scream and shout. It's not all you.
So let's say I want to actually reduce this. I just go ahead and just take this down a bit. All right, so once you're done with that and you're done with the cutting of those harsh frequencies or frequencies that you feel are a problem, the next step, I call it the broad boosted. So this is where you use still the same EQ. This time, you're not just cutting out, okay, but you're boosting those frequencies that you think, to add more life to the whole sound. Let's just see how this sounds all together with all the rest of the plugins.
Yeah, I've gotta be right where you are. Every second, every minute, every hour. Rather in your arms, I'll feel you the night. Feel dawn.
So you can hear how that subtle, all is about subtle differences. It just brings up, brightens the track a bit, okay, and makes it sound clearer. And this rounds up the whole EQ processes. So as you can see, first of all, we have the whole cutting of the extreme lows and the extreme highs. Then we have the mid side EQ, where we go ahead and cut the low end from the sides, okay. Then we have reducing all these harsh frequencies, and then lastly we have the last EQ, and this does this way you go ahead and for this track I just boosted the highs right here, boosted a bit of the lows, and then boosted a little bit of this section right here to make it sound better. So that rounds up the whole EQ process. And then next to this, the next step in the process is compression. And compression in mastering just glues the whole mix together. Okay, it smooths out the overall dynamic of the track so that it feels more cohesive and controlled without squashing the life out of it. All right, so as you can see, we have Fruity limiter right here, and this was actually not the only compression that was in the master. As you can see, we have Maximus right here, but aside this compression that was in the Maximus, I also wanted to compress the whole track together using Fruity limiter right here. Right. Like I said, for EQ, there's actually no formula technically to how the compression works. It just depends on, your taste and what you want to achieve. The next step in the chain has to do with stereo separation. And I use Maximus for this, as you can see right here. Okay, so this Maximus does two things actually. First of all, it does a multi-band compression and it does the stereo separation. So like I said earlier, we have first of all the Fruity limiter to compress the whole thing, and then we have Maximus to compress those low ends, highs, low end mids and highs. So you can see right here we have the lows. You can see I went ahead and did this, and I moved the stereo separation a bit towards mono. Okay, just a little bit. You don't want to push it too much, okay? All right. Then for the mids, okay, we have this, and I boosted this also a bit to the left, which is taking it a bit more stereo. And then for the highs, I went the stereo a bit more, and had this pattern right here on the compression. And if you are new to this, my advice for you, if you're actually new to this, is that you just take your time. Okay, it's not something you have to rush. It's something that you just have to take your time and then just be patient with it. So what you can do is just reduce it a bit. Don't take it too much. Just like reduce the bit. For example, if I'm to listen to this track right here, as you can see, this is just the little that was compressed. If I'm soloing this, let me see. Okay, so you can see I just reduced this a little bit, and as you can see, the attack is also increased so that those the punch and everything can also cut through. Okay, so you just have to do this a bit, and not too much. The same thing with the mids. Just take them down a bit and then go ahead and increase the stereo. And then for the highs, just take them down a bit also, and also listen to them. So after you do this, what you can do is just take a break. All right, it's not something that, if you are just starting out with mastering, it's not something that you have to rush. It's something that you have to be very, very patient with, and most importantly, rest your ears. Because sometimes when you listen to this thing back to back to back to back to back, your ears can actually start to deceive you at some point. You think something is better, but when you listen, when you say that and come back again, you find out that it's actually way worse than how it was before. So it is very, very important that you just set it to a point where it sounds good, then just take a break. And after some minutes or a couple of times, you come back and then you listen again. And then if you listen again and then you find out that, okay, this is actually sounding a bit more better, the difference is not going to be much. The difference is not meant to be that significant. It's just to, boost it a little bit. Mastering is about all those little steps that, make the sound better. And just so you know, the stereo processing, it affects the width of the track. It helps make it feel more wide and immersive without actually losing the center focus, without losing the focus on the center. So your song sounds big, but still balanced. So like I said earlier, that is why the lows goes to the middle, the mids we push it to the we spread it out a bit, and then for the highs we actually spread it out a bit more. The next step is the loudness, and this is where you actually push the mix to its optimum loudness. All right, and then for this I still use Maximus. Okay, but as I'm explaining all these different steps, there are a whole lot of different plugins that can actually achieve all of this. It's not much you must use this plugin, but in my case I still use Maximus to achieve my loudness. All right, so this was a very simple process. What you have to do is you have to work on the master itself, and then first of all you have to set your threshold. And as you can see, I set it to 1% of saturation. Now there are two modes. There's mode A, which is to the left, and there's mode B, which is to the right. You can actually just switch between the two and find out which sounds better. It's mostly just a little bit of difference. If we are to turn this on, and then from here you go ahead and increase the post gain right here. So you just go ahead and you move this knob a bit while listening to the track until you find out that it sits right where you want it to be. So let's just go ahead and listen to this track. Like I see, I've taken it back down to 0, and then I'll gradually increase it over again. Okay, sorry, we turn this off. Let's go ahead and bring it back to master. All right. So just gradually increase this.
Running in the ocean, I'll be present for you. To the rhythm of your beating heart, I'm screaming, shouting, not all you know. Yeah, gonna be right where you are. Every second, every minute, every hour. Rather in your
Most of the times what I do is that I increase it up to a point where it starts to distort a bit. All right, then I reduce it back. In my case, in this song, I settled for a post gain of 9.2 dB. And knowing where to rest your post gain takes me to the next categories of plugins. And I don't actually put this into one category, okay, because there are actually a bunch of plugins that can come in at this point. In some cases, I don't use them on all masters. Okay, I just use them for specific purposes if the master demands it. And as you can see, we have these two last plugins right here. And the first one is the Leolian loudness meter. And this is what just helps us measure our LUFS. So if you want your track to actually sound loud in the streaming space, okay, you have to actually set it and measure your LUFS, because this is how you measure loudness. The best way to actually do this, if you have a reference track, which you should, if you're mastering, it's a very good practice. You can actually measure the LUFS of your the track you're mastering, and just mix and master your track to actually fit that loudness. So that is that for the Leolian loudness meter. And then over here we have the tonal balance control. And what this does is that if you play your track, it has this tonal map right here of the frequencies.
yeah, gonna be right where you are. Every second, every minute, every hour. Rather in your arms, I'll feel
So as you can see, my line right here, it actually fits majorly into this broad band right here. Okay, so what you want to do is that most of the time you want to get your own song to actually fit this map right here. And if you notice that some parts are going too up and some parts are going too down, that's when you're gonna go ahead and tweaking your EQ right here to make it fit this particular pattern. In my case, I use the reference track. So in your case, you might just select some of these presets right here depending on your genre. Okay, so you can select hip hop, you can select EDM, and different genres have different pattern. As you can see, this is hip hop right here. We also have EDM. If you have an EDM track, so you can see the range went bigger. But in my case, like I said, I used a reference track, So I actually had that to custom, and it gave me this custom, this custom, this custom shape. All right. So what you want is you want this segment and you want your track to also be within the same pattern, as close to it as possible. All right. So if you see something poking out too much, you can actually go ahead and take your EQ and, go ahead and tame that portion a bit. And why this is actually very, very important when it comes to mastering is because you actually want your songs to translate well across all forms of speakers. All right. So when you actually use this tonal balance control, this map was gotten from top producers and top songs across different genres. So it helps your song sit in that sweet spot for that particular genre. I also added a DSR right here. So it's not something that I usually do. So these are just, I'm going to call them like extra effects that you can just add to, spice up your master. So they are not like the main mastering process, but I just wanted it to dock it down a bit to, tame those harsh frequencies a little bit. So as you can see right here, this is what it turned out to be.
I've come to be right where you are every second.
And this is it before the mastering. If I'm to turn everything off.
I've come to be right where you are.
And this is after mastering.
Every minute, every hour. Rather in your arms all through the night till dawn.
And for example, just for comparison, this is how it was when I mastered the track. As you can see, the waveform itself looks very, very different. So this is how the track looks after I exported it. These are the waveform looks, and this is how it looked before I mastered it. If I'm to, match the volume, the non-mastered track.
I've come to be right where you are. Every second, every minute, every hour.
The master track.
Rather in your arms all through the night till dawn. As I'm drowning in the ocean of your presence, Lord, you are all that I love. To the rhythm of your beating heart, I scream and shout, you're my all in all, Lord. You're my life, and you're my peace. My heart's desire, you are the one I see. I've come to be right where you are, sinking.
So let's go ahead and listen to the chorus, the loudest part of the track, and let's hear how it sounds, the difference.
Yeah, I've come to be right where you are. Every second, every minute, every hour. Rather in your arms, I'll feel you.
So one thing you notice with the meter right here is that in the non-master track, it might sound loud, but it is all over the place. As you can see, it's reaching +3 and almost topping the roof. All right, so
yeah, I've come to be right where you are. Every second.
But with the master track, it sounds almost the same, and it is still within, not really touching that 0 dB.
Yeah, I've come to be right where you are. Every second, every minute, every hour. Rather in your arms, I'll feel you the night till dawn. As I'm drowning in the.
And aside that, we also have that, that balance of the lows, the mids, the highs, and everything just sounds clean and polished. All right, guys, so that'll be it for this video. If you did like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and also enable notifications so that you don't miss out when the next video drops. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.